A man risked his life to save a lion from a painful death, but he could never have imagined the nightmarish situation that awaited him in the vast savannas of Serengeti National Park in Tanzania. The morning sun broke through the mist, painting the tall grasses with a golden light. The air was filled with the pungent scent of acacias and damp earth after the night rain. Through this natural symphony of sounds and smells, an old and narrow SUV slowly moved, leaving behind a trail of reddish dust. Marcus, a young ranger, began his daily patrol with binoculars hanging around his neck and determination in his gaze. His weathered face bore scars from previous encounters with poachers, and his eyes showed a man who had seen more than he should have in his 28 years. Marcus, who grew up in a small town on the edge of the park, had seen since childhood how poachers mercilessly killed animals to profit. When he was 12 years old, he lost his father, one of the first park rangers. Poachers shot him during a night raid. On that day, the boy vowed to continue his father's work, even though his mother begged him to choose a safer life. His mother's words still echoed in his ears. "This land took your father, Marcus. It could take you too." But he couldn't turn away. The wilderness flowed through his veins like blood. Every time he went out, Marcus carefully checked his equipment, making sure he had enough water, medicine, and gear for any emergency. His companion, an older ranger named Toom, often laughed at this habit, but after several situations in which Marcus's preparations saved their lives, he stopped commenting. On his route, Marcus often stopped to hear the pulse of the savanna, the chirping of finches, the distant grunting of hippos near the watering hole, the whisper of tall grass in the light breeze. On his knees, he studied fresh tracks, reading the story of the night as if it were a book. These skills made him one of the best trackers in the Serengeti. That morning, when the air was especially fresh after the storm, Marcus saw a disturbing sign: drops of dark red on the grass, too bright and fresh to be normal vegetation. His pulse quickened, and he instinctively reached for the radio, but a sensation, almost tangible, stopped him halfway. Reinforcements would arrive too late, and the wounded animal needed help now. He shut off the engine and got out of the car in silence, making sure his tranquilizer was ready just in case. With each careful step along the trail of blood, the tension inside him increased. His experienced hearing picked up the slightest sounds. The crack of a branch under his feet could be a signal of a trap for poachers, or a growl could warn of a wounded predator. He heard neither, and that worried him even more. Rounding a dense acacia bush, Marcus froze, disbelieving. A huge male lion lay before him. His majestic dark mane was matted with dried blood, and his body was entangled in a steel cable used by poachers to set deadly traps. The cable had cut deeply into the lion's flesh, leaving bleeding wounds. A trap for antelope or zebras had caught a much larger victim. The lion raised his head, and his amber eyes met Marcus's. But instead of the rage and aggression that Marcus expected, he saw only exhaustion and pain. A low roar, more like a weak moan, broke the silence. It was clear that the lion had been trapped for hours, weakening with each failed attempt to free himself. Marcus slowly took off his backpack without breaking eye contact with the lion. The slightest mistake could cost him his life, but leaving the animal to die was not an option. His instincts screamed danger. A wounded predator was unpredictable, especially when cornered. However, something inside him told him that the lion understood that the man posed no threat. "Hold on, friend," the man whispered, taking a pair of wire cutters from his toolkit. "I'm here to help. Don't do anything stupid, and we'll both get out of this alive." Inch by inch, Marcus worked to free the lion from the deadly trap. The wire resisted, now digging into his own fingers, hard enough to draw blood, but he didn't stop. Sweat poured into his eyes, mixing with the dust, as time stretched on endlessly. Every time he took another turn of wire, he braced himself for an attack. Adrenaline coursed through his veins and kept his nerves on edge. The lion seemed to understand what was happening. He shuddered in pain each time the wire tore away from his wounds, but he made no attempt to defend himself. His eyes remained fixed on the man's hands, watching every movement with careful attention. When the last turn of wire fell to the ground, Marcus exhaled in silence. Carefully, he searched for antiseptic in his backpack and began to treat the deepest wounds. The lion shuddered as he felt the sting, but made no attempt to attack. His breathing remained uneven, but there was something new in his eyes, something between relief and gratitude. Marcus dismissed the idea as absurd, and yet, at that moment, something passed between them, an unspoken understanding. "I'll call you Zola," Marcus said, recalling a word from the local language that meant dawn. "Because you'll see many more dawns, my friend." Marcus slowly retreated, giving Zola space and the opportunity to decide his own fate. To his surprise, the lion rose on shaky legs, took a few unsteady steps, then stopped and turned. That long look over his shoulder was etched in Marcus's memory forever, as if the predator wanted to remember the face of his savior. After that, the majestic animal, still limping, disappeared into the tall grass, back to base. Marcus told his colleagues what had happened, but was met with skepticism and laughter. "A lion wouldn't lie there while you freed him," they told him. "He would have eaten you." Only Toom remained silent, watching Marcus with a thoughtful expression. Weeks turned into months. Life returned to its usual routine of patrolling, tracking poachers, and helping wounded animals. But Marcus often found himself peering into the meadows in search of a golden shadow. And one day he saw it, the silhouette of a lion with a dark mane, following his SUV from a safe distance. At first he thought it was his imagination, but then it started happening regularly. At first, Marcus's colleagues didn't believe his stories about a lion who seemed to be watching him, but soon they witnessed this strange phenomenon for themselves. The lion never approached people, but he was often seen on the horizon when Marcus worked alone. "You're crazy," said the station chief, a veteran ranger with 30 years of experience. "It's a wild animal, not a pet. He's waiting for the right moment. Keep your gun close." But Marcus saw what others didn't. How Zola stayed within sight, not getting too close, but not disappearing completely. One day, stopping at a watering hole, Marcus was amazed to see the lion chase away a pack of hyenas from his car before disappearing among the acacias. Another time, when... Coincidence. But even the skeptics couldn't deny the facts. Wherever Marcus went, the golden shadow followed him like a silent guardian. The dry season brought new challenges. The relentless heat dried up the water sources, which made the animals nervous and unpredictable. Territorial conflicts between herds intensified, and poachers became more active, taking advantage of the fact that animals gathered around the few remaining water sources. During this difficult time, in the western part of the park, a herd of elephants, enraged by thirst and pursued by poachers, became a serious threat to tourist camps. The huge animals had already destroyed several tents, although there were no human casualties. The situation became more dangerous every day. Receiving a call on the radio, Marcus immediately rushed to help a group of photographers from the National Geographic Society who were in the path of a stampeding herd. The wheels of his SUV spun helplessly in the loose sand of a dry riverbed, while the enraged elephants advanced with every second. Coordinating the evacuation by radio with other rangers, Marcus tried to buy time. He turned on the headlights and honked the horn, hoping to attract the elephants' attention and give the photographers a chance to escape. The maneuver worked, but at the cost of Marcus being cut off from the main group of rangers. To escape the pursuit, he drove his car through a narrow canyon, hoping that the huge elephants wouldn't be able to follow him, but he miscalculated. The Jeep got stuck between two rocks, and the engine stalled. The ground trembled beneath him. The enraged leader of the elephants, a huge bull with a broken tusk, was leading the herd straight for him. The air filled with the smell of dust and animal fear. A wave of panic swept over Marcus as he realized that he had nowhere to run. Behind him was a dead end. The enraged elephants were approaching. He grabbed his flare gun, knowing it would only delay the inevitable. The huge gray figure of the leader appeared at the entrance to the canyon, filling the entire space. The elephant raised its trunk and let out a deafening trumpet that shook the walls of the canyon. And then, out of nowhere, a golden blur appeared. Zola appeared like a ghost, jumping onto a rocky ledge above the elephant before landing between Marcus and the giant. His roar, full of rage and defiance, ripped through the air like thunder. Marcus had never seen anything like it. A lone lion faced a creature that outweighed him dozens of times. Instead of attacking directly, which would have been suicide, Zola began to maneuver, diverting the elephant's attention from Marcus. He dodged the blows of the trunk with lightning reflexes, roaring and lunging to keep the huge beast focused on him. It was a deadly game, but the lion practiced it with incredible skill. Marcus took advantage of the distraction to get out of the Jeep and climb onto the rocky ledge. Stones crumbled, sharp edges cut his palms, but adrenaline numbed the pain. Looking back, he saw the rest of the elephants entering the canyon, while Zola continued his desperate dance with the leader. Then, in a fateful moment, the elephant's trunk finally struck the lion, causing him to fall several meters. Zola crashed into the rocks and fell, but almost instantly got back to his feet, as if refusing to admit defeat. Marcus, now in a relatively safe place, watched the unequal battle in horror, but nature sometimes teaches unexpected lessons. After several long minutes of confrontation, the exhausted leader of the elephants seemed to lose interest in the strange lion who was neither running nor attacking directly. With a last look at Zola, he turned and led the herd in another direction, disappearing into the depths of the savannah. Perhaps instinct told him that water and survival were more important than this strange conflict. Zola collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily. His side rose and fell with exhaustion, and recent wounds and bruises covered his golden fur. Still shaken by what had just happened, Marcus cautiously descended, unable to believe that a wild predator had just risked his life for him. His hands were bloody from cuts, and his knees weakened from the strain, but he had to get to his savior. The ranger approached cautiously, expecting the lion to retreat. Wild animals never like to show weakness, but Zola only turned his head, meeting Marcus's gaze. At that moment, Marcus did what he had never dared to do. He knelt down next to the wild predator. For the first time, he reached out to touch his thick mane. "You saved me, Zola," he whispered, feeling the lion's heart beat beneath his palm, fast from exhaustion, but strong. "Now we're even, brother." When the other rangers found them several hours later, they couldn't believe their eyes. Mark was sitting, leaning against a rock, and next to him lay the huge lion, allowing the man to treat his wounds. No one dared to approach, fearing to provoke the predator, but there was no need. Mark simply got up and walked towards them, while Zola watched him, making no sign that he was going to follow him. The news of the lion who had saved a ranger spread throughout the park and beyond. Skeptics called it a coincidence, romantics called it gratitude, and zoologists went there hoping to study this unique case of connection between species. Tourists began booking safaris to see the famous guardian lion and his human friend. But Marcus knew that their connection was not intended for public spectacle or scientific articles. After the incident with the elephant, Zola became more cautious and less often appeared in open spaces. However, when Marcus patrolled the savannah, he often saw a familiar silhouette on top of a hill or in the shade of a baobab. Sometimes the lion followed the SUV for kilometers. Other times he simply observed from a distance, as if making sure that the man was safe. The deep wounds inflicted by the poacher's wire eventually healed and left only a few scars on Zola's golden fur, silent symbols of the extraordinary friendship that began that day. They were constant reminders of the moment that changed the destiny of man and beast. In times of danger, when poachers or sudden floods threatened the park, Zola always seemed to appear as if by intuition. One time he led a group of lost schoolchildren to the road, where the rangers found them. Another time, his roar warned Marcus of the presence of a hidden leopard, ready to pounce. Old Tomb, the only one who had believed Marcus's story from the very beginning, often said, "Sometimes spirits take the form of animals to protect those who guard the land." Marcus didn't believe in spirits, but he couldn't deny that there was an understanding between him and the wild predator that went beyond the ordinary. At sunset, when he returned to base, Marcus often stopped at a lookout point from which the entire savannah stretched out before him, bathed in the red and golden tones of the sunset. And almost always, on the border between light and shadow, his silent guardian appeared, a reminder that even in the wildest hearts, there can be a place for loyalty and gratitude. When newcomers asked him if he was afraid to work surrounded by dangerous predators, Marcus simply smiled. He had learned something important. Respect and kindness can break down barriers that seem impossible to overcome. And every day when he went out on patrol,